At the time of this video, there are 6 Tremors movies, and I watched them all. I'm more familiar with the first 2 movies, and I saw the third one some years ago, and then recently, very recently, in over like 2 days, I watched 4, 5, and 6. So the franchise starts off with the first movie from 1990 called Tremors. It was an amazing movie starring Kevin Bacon, and this is where we got to meet the main characters, Val and Earl, and of course Bert, the gunman, who goes on further into the franchise and appears in all the subsequent movies. This is essentially how the movies go in order. I'm not kidding around, even though it's really silly and they don't really make sense, but here we go. It's for fun. The first one is taking place in Nevada. It's a arid desert area, and all of a sudden these big monster worms that travel underneath the dirt start killing people and cattle. These worms, we talked about them in other videos too. There's these huge horse-sized things or rhino-sized things that pull people under the ground, or they attack you from under the ground. They use their 3 long tentacle-like tongue appendages with snake chompers on the ends of them, so it's like they're their own little creatures, and they use that to grab you and pull you into their large beak-shaped mouth with opening mandibles on their bottom jaw. They have no eyes, and they hunt primarily from sound and vibrations. So if you move at all on the ground, if you step on the dirt or you step on anything, they're so hypersensitive to sound and to vibrations that they'll know exactly where you are at any given time. The movie is listed as a horror comedy because even though it's kind of creepy, not really creepy, it's one of those what if situations, it is very comedic in some elements, but it's not the kind of comedy that makes you feel like you're watching some medieval jester in the modern century trying to be funny to a bunch of people who are completely dead inside. The plot for the whole movie is for the people of the town called Perfection to survive and to kill off these things. Bert, the prepper, or the guy who is called a survivalist, who has this big bunker and has a whole bunch of guns, he and his wife successfully help them because of the bombs that they have, that they use to trick the worms into swallowing them. They also learn that these sandworms are very smart, for worms that is. In the first movie, they're more primal than anything else, so they're just acting predominantly out of instinct, except for one individual who seems to be smarter than all the other graboids. So, Graboid defeated. Presenting now the sequel, Tremors 2 Aftershocks, one of my favorite Tremor movies, where we get to see the Graboids once again, but then we learn that these things, these sandworms, are actually like the freaking baby cribs to 3 little things inside of them that hatch to walk on the surface and can hunt their prey above ground. So now they're above ground, and these 2-legged things with no limbs on the front and no eyes have these heat sensors that allow them to see humans and anything else with body heat. They hatch by tearing out of their egg sacs inside of the graboid and eating out the graboid. Like, they eat everything inside of the graboid, which is themselves. I still don't really totally understand how the life cycle of these creatures work. In this 1996 sequel, the movie takes place in Sonora, Mexico. Earl and Bert make a return as Val is now married to the science student from the first movie, Rhonda. So yeah, no more Kevin Bacon. We focus on Earl as the main character who works together with this fanboy named Grady. They later enlist Bert for help, who has been divorced from his wife left him, so of course he jumps at the opportunity. And of course, let's be serious, they're using Bert for his guns, because he's the only one that's prepared. In this fantastic rendition of Tremors, Bert is totally sidelined as he didn't even realize that the graboids have evolved. The movie is about them trying not to be detected by these graboids. I swear, this is like a freaking video game in the making. And the movie ends with them defeating the little baby graboids, or I guess teenage graboids that are much smaller than the actual graboids. What are they called again? Shriekers, there you go, because every time they sense heat, they shriek. Yeah, they defeat these guys by a bomb. Tremors 3 is called Back to Perfection, meaning back to the town Perfection. It's where Bert Gummer, the gun guy, goes back to his hometown of Perfection, Nevada. And now in this movie, apparently the government doesn't want people hunting graboids because they're an endangered species, which absolutely makes no sense. People are dying. It's not like they are creatures that are being mowed down because people are cutting down their forests for wood. These creatures actually exist to kill people, and the government's like, no, they're endangered. But the real endangered animals that actually do nothing to anyone, they don't care about them. This movie makes no sense. Trust me. It's one of those few movies where I'm okay because I'm like, I can still make fun of it, but it makes absolutely no sense. The movie is about avoiding these shriekers that have now evolved into ass blasters because they fly by shooting fire out of the behinds or by combusting the air to launch them high enough so that they can glide on the wind. It just gets more ridiculous, but it's so fun. And they defeat them by blowing them up using their own combustible gases. You see the trend here? El Blanco, this albino graboid, gets left alone because he is sterile. Albino creatures cannot reproduce, and apparently they take this to heart, even though this is a prehistoric creature that people still don't know a lot about, so it doesn't really make sense why they would do that. But again, this movie makes no sense. But the real reason why Bert leaves El Blanco alive is so that he's the only graboid left, and so that Melvin from the first movie, the little kid that was on the rooftop, could not make their town into, I guess, a bigger town, because he wanted to buy it to build it back up and industrialize it or whatever else. And apparently, even though this kid is supposedly rich, he can't hire a whole bunch of people to do exactly what Bert does and blow up the worms. But hey, makes no sense. Tremors 4: The Legend Begins is actually a prequel to the first 3 movies. Following Tremors 3 that came out in 2001, the 2004 Tremors movie basically tells a story of how the graboids came to be or why they were released. Apparently, it was this old mining place in the Perfection Town. This took place in 1889. Anyways, this town depended on the silver mine that was right by the town or right in the town. And there's a hot spring nearby that caused the graboid eggs to hatch. Eggs that have been in slumber for millions of years. Yes, Bert is in this movie, but get this, the Bert that we're seeing, that's played by the same actor, is actually the great-grandfather of Bert Gummer that we know, called Hiram Gummer. Back then, he was a rich guy who just got rich off of his father and then lost all of his riches, came to the town of Perfection and had to suffer with these inhabitants when they got attacked by a bunch of underground sandworms. Mr. Kelly, a gunman that he hired to take care of the graboids, taught him the little bit that started him on his path to knowing how to use firearms. Mr. Kelly unfortunately died because he was eaten by a graboid and went down like a boss. He was shooting that thing all the way down its throat hole. Great-granddaddy Bert was gonna leave everybody to their own devices and be like, look, I gotta get out of here. I'm gonna get back on the next train to where I'm gonna go and start over, even though I don't have my riches anymore. But then he felt bad because he got a message at the train station when the guy said that these stupid, crazy town people said there were giant worms coming to attack them. And Bert's great-granddaddy felt bad leaving them, so he went back to the town to help. He helped them to trick one of the last graboids to a steam traction engine, and then it got reeled in and got blown up when it impacts the steam engine. And again, it ends in another explosion. I like this because, you know, even though some people didn't like this, you do get a really interesting backstory and understand why Bert Gummer that we know today is the way he is, especially as a gun enthusiast. The next movie takes place 11 years after The Legend Begins and is basically a relaunch of the franchise. This is the first movie that is made without Stampede Entertainment, which is the one responsible, the company responsible for all the other movies. Universal Studios is like, we're taking this for ourselves. We're gonna make it better. And honestly, this was the first movie that looked like it really got upped in production value, even though I feel like the first 2 movies are still the best. So this is like the other Tremors movies, but instead it takes place in Africa, and the ass blasters and graboids are way bigger and way meaner than they were before. Not only are the graboids bigger and meaner and smarter, but they can also detach their little tentacle things from out of their mouths. Bert Gummer is now older, much older, and he has his own survivalist series. He gets a new cameraman, who he later discovers is actually his son, who was conceived 40 years ago with some one-night stand he had in Florida. We find out the reason that the graboids were mostly chasing the people in the day is because the little girl, her name is Amale, she actually had one of their eggs, and it was like a Jurassic Park 3 situation where the graboids weren't okay with that. So even during the daytime, even though they hunted at night normally, during the daytime, they chased the humans because they had the egg, or this little girl had the egg. They destroy the main graboid by using a thunderstorm and utilizing the lightning to blow it up. Jesus Christ. The movie ends really cute because Travis is now spending time with his new father. I mean, it is like his new father because he's never known him before. It's like having a father for the first time, even though he's your real father. But he starts spending time with him by becoming his co-host on his survivalist TV show or whatever kind of show that they have. And they're going to go all over the world to kill a whole bunch of monsters. And I see what they're doing here with the franchise. I see what they did here. They're opening up the possibility of there being spin-offs of the Tremors franchise because Bert's son did mention in the movie that, oh, he goes around killing Bigfoot and werewolves and all this other stuff. And I think he did it as a joke, but they did mention something like this in the movie where if this stuff is real, the sandworms rather, the graboids, then that means that there are a whole bunch of other stuff that could be real. I don't think it was an accident that Universal or whoever did this movie kind of left that in there, because now that will open up a whole other can of worms, pun intended, for there to be other offshoots of the Tremors franchise in terms of monster movies. The last movie is called Tremors: A Cold Day in Hell. It's basically the Tremors movie that came before, but just in snow. This movie's a little bit different because, yeah, yeah, we do have graboids in here, and they're also very big and very dangerous. But I haven't seen them detached. For these ones, the Canadian ones, they're big like the African ones, but they don't detach their tentacles. I don't know what. Every movie has its own shtick. But it's more difficult now because Bert is now infected by graboid blood. It's killing him, and he got infected from the time he got swallowed in one of the movies. Apparently, he swallowed some graboid juice, and now that created this kind of... It's really freaking gross. I don't even want to talk about it. All you gotta know is he's dying, and they have to save him. But to do that, they need to capture a live graboid and get something from out of their gland underneath their head. I swear they make it up as they go along. And then they use that to try and make a serum to save Travis's father, Bert. It looks like Bert's dead, and then he isn't. He's totally fine. Guess how they end the movie? Yep, the last graboid that they took the serum from that they used to save Bert, they blow it up. I swear to freaking God. Every single one of these movies ends with the graboids being blown up. There is like no other way to kill them. I think The Legend Begins is the only one that was kind of remotely different than the others, because even though the graboids still technically blow up, the reason why it exploded was because of the impact from smushing into the freaking trains. But it's just the same thing over and over again. Never ends. But I do like that there's different situations that you find yourself in with these graboids. They're always evolving, and based on the biome that they're in, they're always different. I absolutely love this franchise, and people are asking if there's going to be more movies. I have no idea, but it would be really cool because you can't really go wrong with these movies. You can't. They already started off silly. There's no other place to go but up. Anyways, if you guys have watched the Tremors franchise, what was your favorite movie out of the entire franchise? I would say mine is the first one, because it was actually really spooky, especially when you find out that the worms are evolving into something else that can now go on the surface and hunt you. Like, you can't stand on something and just say the worms aren't going to get you while you're there. It's freaking crazy. I love how every new movie they come up with something new. I know that they also got Bert's son in on it, Travis, because they know Bert's not going to be able to do this forever. Personally, I don't really like Travis. I mean, he's okay, but he's no Bert. And I could find a whole bunch of other likable characters other than him. He just seems very douchey to me, and I think the only time I took him seriously is when he knew his dad was going to die in A Cold Day in Hell. That's when I kind of felt sorry for him. But still, there's something about the character that just doesn't really fit. I would not watch, like, I wouldn't be over the moon watching the human side of things with him as the main character. It just doesn't fit. Bert is a way better character. I feel like the franchise would even do well if they put Larry David in as the main character. It just wouldn't work with Travis. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not giving him enough credit. But what do you guys think about the franchise? Which is your best movie? Let us know in the comments, and thanks so much for watching. This has been Ultiori. You ask, we answer.